The cabin is small. The window panes filled with flower pots where a selection of herbs is basking in the warm sun of this Caribbean island paradise. The chair is creaking under my weight. Or maybe it is the floorboard beneath that gives away just a little. The place smells of old hemp rope, and bundles of garlic are hanging down from the roof beams. There is a subtle undertone of old tarred wood and something more poignant, perhaps a hint of sulfur. If one would add some noises or swords clanging, the illusion of being on a pirate ship would be quite convincing. On the way in, over the door, there was a faded sign with most of the words now unintelligible. It is my intention to apply for a spirit license, a sign often seen in these parts. A legal disclaimer of some sorts, I believe. My host is perhaps the least known, yet one of the most prolific authors of children's adventure books in the last 40 years, Abigail Walker. The woman looks to be in her late 50s, but unless there have been several people writing under a pseudonym, she must be closer to 80, as her books have been banned, shunned, and hidden from view ever since the late 70s. My road here has been long, both literally and figuratively, since it took 13 months to arrange this sit-down, counting from my first contacting Miss Walker's only remaining publisher. In this day and age, it is a bit disheartening to come to realize that this long-time author has only recently seen any commercial success. We will get back to why and how a little bit later. Abigail Walker glides into her hot kitchen from a back room hidden behind a heavy curtain. Dressed in a vibrant blue satin gown, she moves like the folds of her dress were her sails. Neal, darling, so good to meet you. Can I offer you some tea? When I decline, saying I don't really like tea, eagerly digging for a notepad from my shoulder bag to start the interview, she laughs and pours a thin stream of clear liquid to a shot glass from a bottle decorated with some sort of sea monster. She says, I don't like tea either, but you can't drink only rum. She pronounces rum like I would imagine the original Dutch colonists pronouncing rumbeljan. As the drop is in the glass, I see no way to decline what is offered and take a sip of the almost totally clear liquid. The drink reaches the back of my throat before the smell of strong alcohol registers fully. It tastes smooth and balanced, but it feels like getting slapped to the face. Miss Walker chuckles and pulls up a chair, sits next to me, not across the table like I had assumed. Her wild, long, black, curly hair smells vaguely like vanilla, cardamom, and citrus, and I am instantly drunk and enamored. Surely this doesn't feel sexual, more like being so thoroughly charmed that all my German propriety falls away. The boatman who brought me over from the larger island had asked me why a young white man is traveling to the lady to make a love potion, a phrase so out of turn at that point that I had just filed under being too heavy in pidgin English to really mean anything, and now that I certainly was feeling more than I should have after just one sip of rum, however strong, I started to wonder if there was truth yet in these rumors I heard in Kingsport of Miss Walker being an enchantress. Suddenly the old woman grabs my right arm and pushes the sleeve up. I don't understand what is happening, and with whatever spell she has me under, I am unable to resist. With a cold, grumbling voice that echoes strangely, she asks, Are you a seeker or a traveler? I didn't understand the question then, and the listener can be assured that you don't have to either. Neither, I whisper, with whatever command of my own body I still hold. She doesn't seem to believe me and pulls a large, ornate silver coin from somewhere, placing it on my bare wrist. She whispers some words in a language that sounds awfully like Dutch, but isn't. My misspent youth in northwestern Germany has given me a good understanding of most Western European languages, but this is not one of them. It must be some polyglot born out of the crucible of cultures here in the old colony islands. While the meaning of the words escapes me, the tone carries the message across. She whispers and beckons like calling out a cat from underneath a summer house. She repeats the same word 3 times, waiting a couple of seconds in between. When nothing happens, She chuckles and takes away the silver coin she has been pushing against my wrist so hard that it has left an indentation on my skin. Forgive me, my darling, she now says with all the sudden vitriol gone from her voice, pouring more of her home distillation to my glass. Not one can never tell just by looking who comes a knocking, but I see you came the long way around, and that, well, that means you are not here for. Her voice trails off, and she stares into nothing for a couple of seconds, then stomps the floor twice with her foot. A waif of a woman appears from behind the curtain to the back room. She is tall and impossibly slender, dressed in a loosely hanging grey fabric that makes her seem like a day wraith, a product of some Eastern European mythology. Such a person feels so out of place in this voodoo hut that my breath is taken away for a second. She is carrying a tray full of food and lays it on the table with a strange gesture that I have to interpret as kind of a curtsy. They exchange a few words, again in that almost Dutch that is so close to being illegible that it hurts to listen. The whisper of a woman then backs away and vanishes behind the curtain. Miss Walker sets a plate in front of me and starts piling on stuff from the tray to it. She's not joining us, I ask, vaguely nodding towards the curtain. Takelings don't eat together with the house, Miss Walker bluntly explains, and having built a mountain of food on my plate, starts picking things for her own. Takel, who is she, I ask. My apprentice, I think you would call it. For writing or for this? I question and clink my rum glass against the bottle on the table. A wide smile brightens Miss Walker's face. Now, we eat. She cheers and digs in with the kind of gusto that one would expect from a pirate captain. What lies on my plate is a feast. Sliced fruits and braised vegetables, a mash of something vaguely orange, perhaps sweet potato, and steaming cup of what appears to be pulled something, smothered with thick brown sauce that smells wonderful. There are no utensils, and Miss Walker is eating with her bare fingers, so I hesitantly pick up a piece of carrot and scoop some of the meat on it. The taste is wonderful, the meat tender and stringy like a good pulled pork, but this isn't pork. At least I don't think it is. It has been a long day since my hotel breakfast. At the time between, my only nourishment has been a bottle of water and a protein bar, and I suddenly realized that I've never been this hungry in my life. With somewhat uncharacteristic abandon, I stuff my face until nothing remains on my plate. A loud belch escapes my mouth at the end of the meal, and I'm mortified. But Miss Walker just laughs and calls out the feather-thin girl with a single word. I don't know if that is her name or just a command, but the girl is there instantly, with a wash basin. She kneels by my chair and holds the vessel for me to wash my greasy hands. The liquid smells and feels like it has some soap in it. I push my hands in and start washing. I try to get a look at the girl's face, but her head is down, and the long black hair drapes her face. When I've washed my hands clean of the feast, the soapy water dripping from my fingers, she puts down the vessel and pours a stream of clean, warm water from a jug over on my hands, the water dripping down the wooden floor and into the cracks between the floorboards. She then hands me a small white towel, stands up and bows. I get a glimpse of her bright blue eyes behind the veil of her hair, and the eyes are beaming with joy. The apprentice then moves over and repeats the ceremony with Miss Walker. I watch closely as the old woman washes her hands, and in the end gently touches the apprentice on the cheek. There is emotion there, and it is pretty plain that my initial fears of human trafficking are swept away. For a moment I thought these could be lovers, but then I realized, yes, there is love here, but it's not romantic in nature. These two are not lovers, or a master and a slave. They are a master and an apprentice. Now that the meal is over, Miss Walker leads me to the back porch of the cabin, and we sit down on a chain swing, side by side. I am filled with terrible unease as every fiber of my body screams with primal lust. I don't understand. I have not had a single arousing thought about either of these women, and yet I am like German steel. I must have looked like I was panicking a little. Don't worry, Miss Walker says with a terrifying, knowing grin across her face. That is the sjödreki, the how we say, well, the meat we just had anyway. It is not us you want to mount, but the whole world instead. She laughs, as I must have turned beet red by then. So, white boy, you came to ask questions. So ask. The old woman leans back and pushes the porch swing into motion. There is a gentle wind blowing from the east, and it scatters in the forest leaves, leaving a steady noise floor. I can hear the cicadas in the trees starting their song as the sun is just about to fall into the sea. Their rocking motion is not helping my condition. My thoughts are escaping, running in all directions like dropped marbles. And then I finally understand where the saying of losing one's marbles comes from. Your books, I managed to say, breathing heavily. They were or are banned in most Western countries, mostly because they were considered unsuited for the target audience. What do you think of that? Have you read my books? She asks and rocks the porch wing back and forth. My discomfort is making it difficult to speak, so I just nod. Then you know that they are mostly about a troop of liberated black women taking over a merchant ship and going on adventures. There were three things unsuitable for the Western young adult audience when I first started: the empowerment of women, black women in fact, the violence, and of course the romantic love between the shipmates. Any one of these alone would have gotten a book banned from schools and libraries in the early 80s, and in places still does to this day. That must have been hard, I managed to utter aloud. Yes, from morale point it was very hard. But banning doesn't necessarily harm the author financially. Not at first, but not until it starts to affect your ability to get more books published. Miss Walker remains calm, but is pushing the swing more vigorously, and I feel like the levee is about to break. You know, we actually made several printings of all my books. The first ones were small print runs, sure, but there were always people buying anything with a cult following. It was not that the books were illegal per se. Bannings were more of a societal disapproval. These days, as most everything goes on that Sisyphean network first, the numbers of physical books matter little. But the books do sell fine there. I am unsure why she calls the internet, or perhaps Amazon, Sisyphean, but in my excited state I am unwilling to wander off from the main line of questioning. Your books have been praised for accuracy of the depictions of sailing and life aboard a ship. Were you a sailor at some point? I was, a lifetime ago. In my youth, we all had to climb the riggings from the moment we were able to run. So I've seen my share of the sea. A queen of the seven seas, I joke, desperately trying to get my mind off the trouble I was in. No, no, I'm no queen. Miss Walker turns to me and says, and there is only one sea. What you call the seven seas are merely the shores of the sea I sail from. She glances at the evidence of my discomfort and then shakes her head. Curious. We really ought to get rid of that. She points at it and shouts the same word of calling as before. Before I can comprehend what is going on, the shadow-like woman stands before me, taking me by the hand, pulling me to my feet. For a woman of her stature, she feels solid as a rock. No, I mumble, not knowing if I have the fortitude to refuse what I think is being offered. Keep your pants on, boy, Miss Walker says, sensing my misguided conclusions. Just tell her, Name Magrak, and it will all be over soon. Name Magrak, I blurt out, unable to resist. The wraith of an apprentice smiles only with her eyes, the blue in them flashing silver like orbs of mercury. She presses the palm of her hand to my heart, and I feel a flux of energy from my insides rush to the surface. Reality fractures. I see four slender sisters standing at the edge of the forest, laughing at me, the woman siphoning my life force. Sparks and flickers like badly tuned TV broadcast. The cicadas sing in unison, and in the vibrations I can hear the song for the first time. At the crossing point, where the main wheel turns the worlds, casting time and life out into the universe. The one true city stands. You have not been here, but you know these streets. You listen to the sound of the Black Lake and look upon the storm of creation. For this is the name we first cry out in birth, without words, and sigh as our last breath, without meaning. This is Carcosa. I wake up in a bed with a roof over my head. Did I pass out? In a sudden rush of panic, I thrust about and turn to my side. I'm under a heavy blanket. It makes me feel tied and bound. The apprentice is there whispering, Nene, Nene, and helps me up to a sitting position. I know this she is strong, real strong, as she lifts the blanket underneath me by the corners and effortlessly moves me with it. I hear the pouring of a liquid to a glass, and the voice of Miss Walker sounds from the other room. You went out like a light, but maybe she also took too much. Tell him you are sorry, she commands the apprentice, as she darkens the doorway into this back room I have not seen before. Chamer, Eke Chamer, the apprentice says under her breath. I nod, as there is not much more I could say or do. Miss Walker pushes a steaming hot cup to my hands that are now free from under the covers. The cup smells of strong tea, spiced with some kind of rum, and with something approaching reckless abandon. I take a gulp. What did you do to me? I ask. But there is little demand in my voice. What falls out my lips is more a statement than a question. Miss Walker doesn't answer as much as commiserates. I'm sorry, but I had no idea you would react so strongly. Usually men from this gear only get the emotional reaction, and that is much easier to deal with. I thought I smelled the labyrinth on you when you first came, but you didn't react to the Ankerstilbär, so I thought it would be safe. I stare at the old woman who now leans over, her silhouette burning with bright light pouring in from the kitchen. Desperately, I glance at the apprentice, perhaps thinking she could make me understand any of this. Miss Walker takes a wet towel and gently wipes my brow. She sits up and continues her barrage of meaningless explanation. Tell me, how did you first hear of me? She asks. The apprentice moves silently in the back of the room, putting back jars of ingredients on the shelves. Her back is now bare, and in the light pouring in from the kitchen, her muscles glisten. How did I ever mistake her as being almost anorexic? A terrible hint of truth, perhaps even the true answer, pops into my mind, but I hide it in the dark corners of my consciousness. I wish I had the previous German generation's endless emotional void where to throw bad thoughts and truths. But even my generation has plenty of room in the closet for skeletons of self-deception. There is a sudden realization that I've spent several seconds in limbo with Miss Walker's question hanging in the air. I run a magazine of alternative literature. I was looking for material about books with a cult following, and this old librarian lady in Keln gave me a couple of fear books. There is a sudden slideshow of emotions on old Miss Walker's face. From surprise to panic and brief flicker of anger, then the kind of world-eating grin. What exactly did she say? She demands. I'm sure I don't remember, but my lips blurt out an answer anyway. Take a look at these, the words fall out in my native German. They will show you a whole new old world. The apprentice rushes to my bedside, repeating my last words, Neue alte Welt, with religious excitement. Be still, commands the old woman, and the apprentice fades back into the darkness. There is a storm coming, says Miss Walker, and lights up an old oil lamp. In the bright yellow light I see the walls of the back room for the first time. They are covered with woven tapestries depicting topics from her books. Women fighting sea monsters and pirating Spanish ships. I stare at these beautiful marbles and then turn to Miss Walker. The question so clear on my face that I don't even have to ask. I don't really write. It is more like I weave, she says. I see these threads, hold them in my hands and tie them together. And most of my writings, well, it's not all true, nor is it all a fiction either. It is time for you to go, she says with regret. I try to get up from the bed, but suddenly the apprentice has her impossibly strong hand pressing on my chest, pushing me down into the mattress. I try to shout, but I can't manage to inhale. Don't worry, she will guide you, Miss Walker says, and I fall through. All I feel is cold. Silence, screams, and then the walls fall in. I'm in a cave, carved into reality by fear alone. The apprentice stands before me, a woman of such otherworldly beauty that she is almost all I can see. When I blink, a feeling of fractured reality fills me again. I stand at the root of a giant tree, the branches reaching out into the eternities. She takes my hand and leads me down one of the caverns of the underworld tree. The wooden planks of the floor change into smooth stone, then slowly into cobblestones. I smell the centuries of life in the cracks of these stones, the familiar stench of my hometown. Here I've stood in the rain, waiting for someone who won't come. Here I've hurt others, and I've been hurt in return. The apprentice pulls me close and kisses me full on the lips, her body hot to the touch, and her muscles trembling. I feel the heat flowing from her body, and I lose control of all my senses. The only thing I have are Miss Walker's words echoing in the void. There is a storm coming. I wake in my bed, dehydrated and feeling half dead. My apartment smells like a dung heap, the clean, fresh smell of tropics still in my memories. I crawl out of bed and stare incredulously at the unused airline tickets on my living room table. It has been 4 years since my trip to the tropics didn't happen. I had fallen sick and spent several days in bed, completely missing my flight, or so I tell my friends and colleagues. But every night when I go to sleep, I hope to fall through the mattress and be guided again by that otherworldly woman that sometimes visits me just before I wake. She just floats there and smiles. When I wake, I find that I have washed the sheets again, like I was a teenager. Sometimes I whisper the word Miss Walker used to summon her, hoping and fearing that she will hear. World machines, a work of fiction, names, characters, including this unreliable narrator himself, as well as places and incidents that are products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual events or locales or persons living or dead is entirely coincidental and will not help anyone the Nemer have gotten a taste for.